So this is one of 3 talks that were given at the United States Grail's General Assembly in November, addressing major problems that we'll be facing and are facing. And the problem I'm going to address is climate catastrophe. Now, even before the recent extreme weather events like Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Maria, the flooding and destruction of entire neighborhoods in Houston, and of virtually the entire island of Puerto Rico, we've been receiving reports on grave impacts of climate change in the U.S. and around the world. For example, we've seen a loss of 50% of wild animals worldwide since 1970, between 1970 and 2010. And there's been massive soil erosion that's threatening food supplies. And we've seen sea level rise that's endangering the survival of entire coastal communities and islands. And then there are what scientists call feedback loops. Rising temperatures, for example, causing rainforests to give off less oxygen than they once did, which in turn increases the temperature even more. Or another example is when rising temperatures cause Arctic permafrost to melt, which gives off methane, of extremely strong greenhouse gas, which in turn increases the temperature, which causes more melting of permafrost, and on and on. And now we're hearing predictions about the coming dire effects of climate change in the U.S. and around the world. For example, increasing extreme weather events. I mean, we already saw 10 hurricanes in 2017, and predictions of much higher sea level rise, up to 6 feet, double the previous estimate by 2100 if we continue with the previous rate of fossil fuel use. And it's going to have massive health impacts. Heat-related illness, heart and lung problems, and insect-related illnesses like Zika and Lyme disease. And finally, there are going to be worse and worse refugee crises caused by climate change. For example, even more people fleeing from Africa to Europe than there are right now, and you know the problems it's already causing there. So what are the causes of this problem? Of course, at one level, it's the increased burning of fossil fuels. 2015 saw a total increase in the world's fossil fuel consumption of about 0.6%, the equivalent of 127 million metric tons of petroleum, and 2.6 times, that's 260 times, the overall increase in the consumption of renewable energy, which resulted in record high carbon emissions. But at a more foundational level, the cause of the climate catastrophe is the capitalist economic system, which is predicated on the concept of unlimited growth. If the capital that is invested does not produce more capital, which in turn is invested and produces more capital endlessly, then the capitalist market collapses. But this presumes using more and more of the world's resources infinitely. Unfortunately, the planet itself is finite. There is a limit to how many of these resources we can use. For example, if we burn up more than a certain amount of the world's rainforests to grow palm oil, the temperature will get so high that some of us will die from heat-related diseases, while others of us will suffocate from the pollution in the atmosphere. But the market ignores this. The only thing that will save us is transition to a non-growth economy. A third cause of the climate catastrophe, directly related to the second cause, capitalism, is global inequality. This is what Pope Francis is talking about when he speaks of the environmental debt in his environmental encyclical Laudato Si. Countries in the global north at this time and since the onset of the Industrial Revolution have expelled vastly more greenhouse gases into the environment than people in Africa, Latin America, and the Pacific. And because of environmental racism, people of color in the United States are victims of this environmental debt as well. It's sometimes called the global South in the North. This has serious moral implications for us in the U.S. Grail because we have Grail sisters in countries across the global south. For example, the average U.S. resident gives off 90 times as much carbon dioxide as the average Kenyan does. So what are we going to do about this? That is to say, what are the strategies needed to resolve the climate catastrophe? Well, at one level, we need personal strategies. Consume less, a whole lot less. Don't buy that new outfit. Commit yourself and your family to specific actions. No plastic water bottles. Meatless days once or twice a week. Driving and flying in airplanes much less often. And then also, we need educational strategies like organize and lead workshops in your neighborhood and your parish. Have a discussion of Laudato Si if you're in a Catholic church. Actually, in other churches too, everybody loves it. Show and discuss environmental videos and get people to talk about them. But of course, some of us have been doing personal and educational actions like these for a long time, and everything has gotten worse. It's part of what's called the Great Acceleration since World War II, the acceleration of economic growth and also of greenhouse gases. So we need to apply what logicians call the concept of necessary but not sufficient. So we must do those things that we're talking about. They're necessary, but they aren't sufficient to solve the problem. So we have to take all of this to another level, to the level of political action. We have to organize. And in a group as small as the Grail, in order to have impact, this means collaborating with other groups. What are some examples? The Grail Climate Action Circle in New York City is discussing joining the national organization Food and Water Watch, joining with them, especially in their national campaigns that are carried out on the local level. Another organization that's doing a lot of good things, and you do well to look into it, is 350.org. That's Bill McKibben's group, and it has national campaigns like Stop Fossil Fuels and impressive local group actions. For example, 350 Brooklyn is doing really fine things, and our own Grail sister, Yeva Zadina, is extremely active in that group. There are also excellent local groups, not national like Food and Water Watch, but unaffiliated with national organizations, such as here in New York, a group called Sane Energy, an activist group that fights against local fossil fuel initiatives like fracked gas pipelines, as well as for renewable energy like offshore wind farms. I suggest that you Google national climate activist groups to see what they're doing, or write, you know, if you live in Waterbury, Connecticut, write Waterbury, Connecticut Climate Action Group and see if anything comes up, and find out what's going on, and then get involved. It is crucial that we organize ourselves as Grail to join in the fight against the capitalist climate catastrophe.